Hey everybody, welcome to Crucial Wrestling. My name is Travis. Thank you so much for watching. It really does mean a lot when you click on this video, when you like, subscribe, or comment. So just thank you for that. But this video is probably going to be long enough, so I won't waste a lot of time here at the beginning. I don't know if you have seen this video, this clip from Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez, the Wrestling Observer live video about Toni Storm. And if you haven't, it's called The Great Toni Storm Debate. And I watched this video the other day, and I thought I need to make a video about this, or I want to make a video about this, because I think there's a lot here that could be very instructive if elaborated on, at least from my point of view. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of walk through the video, stop it at a few points, and just sort of elaborate on some things that I think mostly Brian is saying that could be informative, instructive, and helpful, and why people are critical of AEW and why this may ultimately hurt their brand. So I want to be clear that the attempt is to try to point out some things and say, the reason we're being critical is because this will hurt your product. It's not the best way to present your product so that it can grow, so that it can make sense, so that you can build upon it. And that's why, it's certainly in my case, why I'm sort of highlighting some of this stuff. And so Brian does a good job of that. I do want to point out, though, that there's no other way to say it. Dave Meltzer is really showing his hand here, that he is an absolute AEW Tony Khan shill. And I don't like using that word or just throwing that around lightly. But when you watch this video, I don't think there's any other way to describe it. He is absolutely shilling for Tony Khan and AEW, trying to make sense out of things that he knows don't make sense and have not worked historically. And it's kind of really sad and desperate to see. And so we'll just get into the video and sort of point things out as we go. Without further ado, let me just get it cranked up here. Very professional, figuring this stuff out. But here we go.
Toni Storm beat Arlie Cameron. So the thing with this match was, I mean, first off, like Toni Storm's back to being a babyface this week after being a heel last week. Serena Deeb's on the ramp watching on and smiling as Tony's getting beaten down. I think she's supposed to be a babyface, but she came off as a heel.
So I'll go ahead and pause it right there. Brian is calling attention to one of AEW's main issues, which is that there are so very few clearly defined baby faces and heels. Now, I know that this was part of AEW's philosophy from the onset of AEW, right? I remember Cody even talking about it. How, oh, no more simplistic booking where it's baby faces and heels. But I thought that was misguided at the time, and AEW's product and its failure has sort of borne out that it was a misguided idea and is a misguided idea. I wanted to talk about baby faces and heels for a minute. I think what they really meant when they said no more baby faces and heels, what they really meant was shades of gray, that baby faces and heels can and should have some shades of gray for more interesting storytelling. And that's fine. That makes sense. And I thought about some examples. So, is Thanos from the Marvel Universe, Infinity War, Endgame, is Thanos a baby face or a heel? I'll give you a moment. Right, this was an easy question to answer. Thanos is a heel, right? He's a heel. However, he believes that his motivations justify his actions. And on its surface, his the concern that he's addressing is actually a good one, right? It's he saw that people were starving and suffering and decided that, well, we can alleviate that. Isn't that a nice thing? The other part of that equation is you alleviate that by wiping out, murdering 50% of all life in the universe so that resources are more plentiful. Now, clearly that's misguided on so many levels. Um, but however, his motivations kind of make him a complex character, right? Because his motivations aren't necessarily ultimately world domination. We see he just ends up sort of, farming and gardening and making food for himself ultimately. He wanted to alleviate suffering. However, his methodology and his callousness made him a heel because that 50% of life in the universe didn't have a say in it and they didn't want to be killed. So he is a bad guy. He's a heel. So let's take two other characters. Uh, let's take Batman. Yes, I know. And I'll address this again. Yes, I know. Thanos is Marvel. Batman is DC. Keyboard warriors can keep it down. I'm a comic book nerd. I get it. I grew up reading comic books. Uh, but let's take Batman and Stone Cold. Now, they would both be classified, I guess, as anti-heroes, right? Like their motivations aren't pure. They wouldn't necessarily call themselves good people. However, the people that they are against are the same people that we are against. The people that they go after are the people that we don't like. They go after the bad guys, right? And it's kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. We cheer them on because they are going after the bad people that we don't like. And so even if their motivations aren't pure, ultimately they are achieving desirable results. And so we see shades of gray in both directions, but one is a heel and one is in those other two, Stone Cold, Batman, are are anti-heroes. They're baby faces, right? And again, let's compare Thanos, Marvel, I know, with Batman, DC, I know. Let's compare their motivations. One is I don't want people to starve and suffer. The other is I want revenge on the thugs and scum that killed my parents. One's motivations are impure. One's motivations, at least on the surface, seem pure, but yet two very different methodologies and results, leading one to be a heel and one to be a baby face. So there's a lot of shades of gray in there, but they're still clearly defined. This is the heel, this is the baby face. It's clear. We're not confused from week to week who they are. They have moments of weaknesses. Yes, they have moments where we're not sure that they're going to make the right decision, if they're the hero or whatever. But ultimately, this is the bad guy. This is the good guy. And you can do everything you want. You can try to be as sophisticated and as intelligent and as artsy as you want, but you will never escape the fact that human beings naturally lean towards supporting the good guy against the bad guy. Human beings naturally understand justice and injustice, right? Like we naturally understand that person A was done harm by person B, and therefore we believe person A deserves some sort of justice or retribution from person B. Babyface and heel. Human beings just inherently understand that, and there's no getting away from that. It is ingrained in who we are. So that was the longest diatribe that I will go on in this video. But I wanted to say that because AEW from the beginning has had a misguided approach to the idea of baby faces and heels. And the fact is, you need clear baby faces, you need clear heels. They can have shades of gray, they can turn eventually, everyone does. But while they're a baby face or while they're a heel, it needs to be clear who's who. Anyway, we'll continue with the video.
And then it's like Toni Storm is the champion against Harley Cameron. And my God, it felt like they went forever. She's like, beat her already.
It wasn't that long at all.
How long was it?
Let me see. Let me get my.
If it's more than 2 minutes, it was too long.
What? They're trying to push Harley Cameron. They gave
She's
Harley
had one match prior to this. Tony's
right
the
with
champion. They're trying to
with
build Tony to a match
but
on the
but
pay per view in a week with somebody else.
but
Have
Mariah
Harley beat somebody else.
So I'll stop it there for a second. Brian is addressing another issue with AEW, and all the wrestling companies do it. AEW just does it constantly, and it's an issue of booking philosophy and just wrestling philosophy in general, which I'll get to in a second. But it's the problem of giving your contenders, your champions, your top guys or girls, these long bangers with these underneath talents. And yes, you do want to make your underneath people that you want to ultimately push or you ultimately want to sort of shine a little bit of a light on. You do want to give them some shine. You do want to give them moments to sort of like prove themselves or get themselves over with the audience. However, I would argue you can do that with enhancement talent. You can do that with other talent, with other mid carders. You don't necessarily need to put them in the ring with one of your top guys, your champions, your challengers, your contenders, whoever, and have them go 10, 15, 20 minutes with those people and make it look like that contender, that champion, barely got away with a win. Yeah, it may make that underneath person look good, but it makes your champion or your contender, the person you're trying to push going into the pay-per-view, look bad because they're going to have to face, the Samoa Joes, the Kenny Omegas, the MJFs, the whoever of AEW. And what you're saying is that it took them 10, 15, 20 minutes to beat this underneath guy. So how in the world can you imagine that they have any, first of all, why do they have any reason at all being in the ring with the champion or one of these top people? And what kind of chance could they possibly have against them? And so you actually do a disservice to the champion and the match between that champion and contender or whatever. In this case, Toni Storm and Serena Deeb, because going into that match with Serena Deeb, Toni Storm looks like she can put away, newer, less experienced underneath talent uh, fairly quickly because she's going to have to be that skilled to beat someone like Serena Deeb. So you ultimately just shoot yourself in the foot and hurt your match and your long-term storytelling. And again, this is where it comes down to the philosophy that AEW chooses to go with. In some ways, it's kind of a lack of philosophy, but is it about having a cool match or building a long-term, believable story that the fans can understand, get behind, and that makes sense as you go into the pay-per-view? And that's the dichotomy there. And I feel like AEW often chooses the first one. They choose, well, let's have a cool match. And a lot of times it's at the expense of the long-term story that they're trying to do, and the long-term build that they're trying to get over on TV. So we'll keep going.
let's see, Toni Storm. They went 7 minutes, and it
Seven
was
minutes.
that. I mean, that's a short match for AEW television,
I was not a big fan of this.
and it was the only women's match on the show. If they had the only women's match on the show and they went 2 minutes, I promise you, there's going to be so much criticism online the next
Well,
day.
you know what I have to say about online criticism? I would rather book for success than worry about online criticism.
Yeah,
I
they had
don't
a good-
care if people are angry that it was only 2 minutes. I would
Brian
not
is
have
talking
Toni
some sense
Storm
here.
a week before a title defense on pay-per-view going 7 minutes back and forth with Harley Cameron, who's had one match.
who looked good in the one match, and this was a good match.
Dave just cannot help but try and make people believe that this makes any kind of sense at all. He just can't help it. He just so desperately feels the need. Sorry there. He just so desperately feels the need to defend AEW and Tony Khan and the booking that he will basically put his reputation as a journalist on the line to shill for this stuff and defend this stuff when it clearly doesn't make sense and isn't a good idea and will hurt the match long term. So anyway, let's keep going.
I thought, I mean, Harley Cameron, for the number of matches she's had, is really good. They had a very good match. Toni Storm, instead of doing the gimmick, is showing that in fact she is wrestling seriously, which she did in this match, and I thought it was very effective. The last time
Who's the heel?
It doesn't matter.
It does matter.
No, it doesn't.
Dave, I have seen so many segments with Toni Storm where there is no heat for the interview because nobody cares about the baby face. Because the baby face. Did you watch the segment they did last week?
Did you? Wait. Were you in the building when Toni Storm came out and she got cheered like crazy? This match did not have no heat. This match had plenty of heat.
Yeah.
Harley Cameron was the heel. Toni Storm was a big-time babyface.
Yes, Dave.
There was nothing wrong with that.
Last week, she was a heel. Toni was a heel last week.
So whoever
and Serena was out there doing a sad story about how she almost died.
And guess what?
Nobody cared. They booed her.
So they switched the thing around to follow the crowd.
So I've got to interrupt here again. Dave highlights another point here. Meltzer highlights a point that's a problem in AEW that I kind of just sort of hit on a minute ago, which is that all that matters is making the crowd cheer in the moment a lot of times, rather than keeping long-term booking in view and doing what's best for the story. So back in the day, wrestlers had this saying, or certainly the good wrestlers who really understood the business, had a saying, which is, get the match over. And what that means is, don't try so hard to get yourself over, meaning make the crowd like you because of the cool move or whatever that you did. Get the match over, meaning make the match make sense. Make sure that the audience understands the story that you're telling in the ring. And build the intensity and the anticipation in the match in a way that either A, makes people come out of their seats and cheer or boo or whatever at the finish, or that whenever there's a a screwy finish or whatever, that the fans understand what happened and want to see a rematch where the baby face gets even or gets whatever, right? Get the match over. Make the match make sense to the people. Don't worry so much about you doing the cool things and people cheering for you. Make people want to not only see the match, but then hopefully want to see the rematch or believe in you and your opponent and the story that you're telling. Get the match over. And that is something that needs to be plastered on every wall in every arena that AEW goes into, in the dressing room, before they come out of the gorilla position, all that stuff. Get the match over. This is not about just making people pop. This is not about just making people cheer you, right? This is about getting the match over, telling a story that ultimately people care about and want to see more of. And that doesn't always happen in AEW because there's such an emphasis on, let's go have the coolest match we can have right now with the most flips, dives, and weapons and tables that we possibly can, rather than having a match that really people can really get invested in and want to see again. Anyway, let's keep going.
What's wrong with that?
Because they didn't switch it. And she will be a heel. She will be a heel the next time you see her.
It doesn't matter as long as the crowd reacted like crazy.
Doesn't matter.
This constant. No, they don't. They have baby.
As long as the crowd reacts.
They have baby faces and heels. And so does AEW, except with Toni.
And it's situational. It depends on who's wrestling who on what show.
Dave's trying so hard.
What's the last show where Drew was a babyface?
Drew McIntyre's not. That's Drew McIntyre. Okay. What about Bronson Reed and Chad Gable when they wrestled each other? Who was the babyface and who was the
Reed and
heel?
Gable.
Bronson Reed and Chad
Yeah,
Gable.
he's reaching
Yeah.
so hard.
Match.
They should have matched last week.
Chad was the heel. And he is a heel.
Yeah, cut Dave's mic.
Bronson Reed's the babyface. Is Bronson Reed the babyface next? Will he be the babyface next week? Is he usually the babyface? No. That's what happens. You have situational things, and that's what you do. Everyone has it because you sometimes make matches where there's a different thing. It's not a big deal, and it's certainly no.
Listen to Dave's logic throughout this video.
The match was good, and again, Toni Storm, who has
Try to
done a
follow
lot
it.
of the gimmick so heavy for so long that has not shown off her wrestling skill. And she's going to do a match with Serena Deeb where whatever it is, they are going to go out and do a wrestling match. So therefore, if Toni Storm went and did her Toni Storm gimmick and Serena Deeb on the pay-per-view, it would suck. So they're basically showing she is going to wrestle Toni Storm, and they're going to have a good match. So that is
We can discuss this after the Double or Nothing match.
That is what
and next Wednesday.
That is what they are. That is what the story is. The story is that she went in there.
He's just rambling.
The crowd knew who the babyface was. The crowd knew who the.
The heels are the most cheered people in AEW.
But
They
knew.
cheer her every week, even when she's playing the heel role against another babyface. She should always be a babyface.
Well,
there's no need for her to be.
Dave's going to reach so hard.
Never going to get booed.
Okay,
so
but
can
guess
we
what?
stop killing all the other babyfaces by having her be a heel that everyone loves?
Okay, but
That's the problem.
Okay, no.
No.
What's this other thing about Toni Storm? What's the other thing about Toni Storm? She is the world champion.
Yes.
A real world champion wrestles baby faces and heels, and in that role, depending upon the situation, you are situational. That's everyone from Luthez to Jack Briscoe to Dory Funk Jr. to Ric Flair to whatever.
That's not what's happening here. What's happening is she is a heel.
She's not a heel.
She is portrayed as a heel.
She wasn't
portrayed as a heel in this match. They have her opponents portrayed. Dave, this is
not portrayed
an exception.
As a heel.
This is an exception.
Harley Cameron is a heel. Harley Cameron is a heel.
This is an exception.
She was a babyface.
Yes. If you watch the show, this is an exception.
And guess what? And it is a angle that makes sense because Harley Cameron wrestled Mariah May, her protege, and
who is portrayed as a babyface.
Who's a babyface in that match, in that situation. So therefore,
it's all situational.
Revenge for the fact that they beat up Mariah May, and so in that role, she is in fact the babyface.
I want to stop here. Meltzer is being confronted with the fact that his brand of booking, which Tony Khan has imbibed and implements each and every week, has failed. You know, Tony Khan is absolutely an acolyte of Dave Meltzer and Dave Meltzer's philosophy of wrestling and wrestling booking, and it's failed, and Dave Meltzer cannot stand to be confronted with it and is desperately using everything that he knows about the facts and figures of wrestling to try and make it make sense. But on its face, it simply doesn't make sense, and it doesn't work, and it hurts the product long term.
So she was a babyface. She got cheered. She had a good match. And, you know, they had a good wrestling match where she showed that she was wrestling. There was nothing. I can't find a thing wrong with this at all.
Nothing.
We'll discuss
Nothing wrong with it.
Again, next Wednesday for the next segment they do with Toni Storm and Serena Deeb.
Okay.
Because I will.
But if they go in there,
Yes.
if they go in the match, it doesn't. So if they cheer Toni Storm, cool.
You've also got to frame Serena Deeb in a way that makes her more likable.
Cheer her.
Well, fine. That's fine. That's fine. What's wrong with that?
Because her opponent is being pushed as a babyface.
Well,
and no one
sometimes-
cares about her opponent.
It's like Meltzer has forgotten how wrestling works.
Supposed to be the babyface. Nobody cared.
Okay. Well, if they go out there and go, if the fans don't care, then guess what? It would have been even worse if she was the heel. and Serena was the babyface. At least in this
No,
case.
that's what is happening. That's why I'm saying it needs to go the other way. Serena Deeb should be the heel. Toni
Good,
should be the babyface.
Good, that
Deanna
you
should have been the heel. Toni should have been the babyface. Toni should be the babyface going forward.
Tony is the baby
It
face.
happened.
Okay, then Toni should be the babyface if the fans cheer.
Okay.
I agree.
All
I
right.
agree.
Well, we'll
I
see
agree.
what happens next week when she's the heel and Serena's the babyface, which is what they did last week.
But guess what? Serena was not necessarily a babyface when she was out on the ramp at all.
She wasn't today, but she was last week when she's talking about how she almost died.
Guess what?
And she's begging the fans to cheer, and they won't.
Brian. Maybe they learned from last week. Is there a possibility they learned from last
He Brianed.
did this? Aside from the fact that it all fits into the
Dave, you want
storyline.
to know why I'll say no, there's not a possibility?
Okay.
Because 3 weeks ago, Toni Storm was playing the babyface role, and I was like, okay, finally they figured it out. Toni's the babyface. The very next week, they switched it again and had Serena Deeb play babyface and talk about how she almost died,
Well, they
begging
thought that.
fans to cheer, and nobody did.
Well, guess what? So they learned.
Okay, if
So-
they learned,
So
great.
they learned.
Sometimes I think Meltzer's in love with Tony Khan.
We will figure out next Wednesday when they do another segment if she's still a babyface.
Well,
Where were we?
Well, it doesn't. As long as the crowd as long as the crowd's going to react, I don't care who the baby face or the heel is. You know, in this day and age, the crowd's going to do what the crowd's going to do. You know, I mean, how many
Why try to inform your audience?
John Cena for 10 years?
Yeah, and what did we say, Dave? We say should have gone babyface.
John Cena should have stayed babyface. Yeah,
and,
because
and when Roman Reigns was getting booed like crazy, we say he should have gone heel.
okay,
Should
John
have
Cena,
gone with it.
Okay, each time I never said John Cena should turn heel. I was always against John Cena turning heel because guess what? I think about business, and the business was that John Cena was selling the most tickets, and John Cena was selling the most merchandise. And if he turned heel, the merchandise sales would go down.
So listen to what Dave just said. He said, I think this way because I'm about business and I think about business. You cannot sit there and say that you care about business when you are shilling for AEW and its brand of booking it's currently engaged in, which is tanking. If you care about business, then you need to say, hey, Tony Khan, this ain't working. Maybe we need to rethink what we believe wrestling is, how it works, and why it's successful. Otherwise, do not tell me or anyone else that you care about the business of wrestling because they are doing the opposite of business. They are losing business. They are losing viewers. They are losing money. They are most likely losing money from TV deals and all that stuff. This is not a successful business. Not that it can't be, and hopefully one day it is, but currently it is in decline. So if you care about business and you care about that company, and if you care about Tony Khan, tell the truth. Be honest about its flaws so it can get better, and try and be instructive on how to do this better so that there will be business to speak of in years to come.
And that's why Vince McMahon never turned him. And when he went to the house shows, he always got cheered. And it was just the TV crowd. And John Cena was the most successful character they had for all those years as he was being booed as a babyface. So it doesn't matter that he was booed as a babyface at all because he was the number one drawing card that they had that entire period. Except for a brief period, I think.
Totally different situation than Toni Storm and AEW.
Have surpassed him. But, you know, it was brief because, you know, didn't whatever, you know, it didn't sustain, and Jeff was Jeff, you know, so it doesn't, like, the whole point is it doesn't matter who they cheer or boo. It's everything is situational. Sometimes fans are going to boo baby faces.
It does matter if
and
you're trying
they
to
do,
tell a story.
you know, it kind of sucks
and
when
the
they
fans
boo
don't
baby
care.
face, so that's probably better to turn them. But sometimes, like, again, John Cena, everything is situational. Sometimes fans are going to boo baby faces, and if they do, you know, it kind of sucks when they boo a baby face, so that's probably better.
Yeah, it kind of sucks when they do that, but no, this is fine. It's situational.
I've seen so many heels get cheered, and it was fine. You know, I mean, it's tough for a baby face, but if business is good, then
Business ain't.
you know, whatever. everyone cheered the NWO. It was great for a while. At some point, of course, it turned bad, but that took years. When it did, then you had other problems. And they tried to turn a babyface to
All
begin
right.
with.
Thank you for watching.
All right. So I'm not going to sort of spend, this video has already gone on long enough, so I'm not going to take too much time sort of wrapping this up. I hope I hope that this video was instructive, or at least I was able to elaborate on some things in a way that made sense. Look, if you care about AEW and you want it to be successful, you need to be able to watch it as objectively as possible and go, this works, this doesn't, and these particular things are consistent, ongoing problems that have clearly pushed away viewers, driven away viewers in droves. Look at where they started, and of course you're going to lose viewers from where you start to where they are now. We were like, I remember just a few months ago, the like literally in the past 2 or 3 months, a lot of the podcasters and commentators were like, man, we used to ask, what were the ratings, what 800,000 and what, and now, oh my God, it's when we asked about the ratings, it's what were the ratings, 700 and what. Well, now we're starting to get to that realm where we're talking about the high 600s on a fairly regular basis, especially if you sort of adjust for overruns and first quarters and things like that. Um, it's it's getting really dicey. And at what point do we possibly, maybe this is unrealistic, but possibly get down to collision numbers? When do we get down to where oh, don't worry, we'll stay at 800,000. We won't get to, a lot of us thought that, okay, there's about 800,000 people who regularly want to watch this stuff. Well, about 100,000 of those people are gone. And who knows if they'll come back. And the question is, do we see another 100,000 leave? Is it going to be consistently in the high to mid 600,000s? And then 5, 6 months down the road, are we talking about the low 600s, high 500,000? Maybe not. Not everything's a straight line like that, but the business is in AEW's business is in serious decline. And I think if you genuinely care about AEW, you need to ask yourself, what is going on here? Have I misunderstood what professional wrestling is and how it works well, and what ultimately the majority of viewers want to see? And the worst mistake you can make is thinking that you're just smarter than all the other viewers. They just don't get it. And, the heck with them if they're not smart enough to get it. The fact is, let me say this right now, and I was going to save this for another video, but if you're an AEW fan, this does not go for everybody, but it certainly does go for a lot of people. You like in-jokes and flips. Tell me I'm wrong. You like in-jokes. Oh, I got the reference, I got the joke, because in Japan that one time they did this one thing. And you like flips and people breaking tables. That is not sophisticated, professional wrestling viewership. You like in jokes that you get, and you like people doing flips. Now, that doesn't go for every single AEW fan, but a lot of the arguments I hear, and they're like, oh, well, this is pro wrestling and this is drama. By pro wrestling, do you mean flips? Do you mean they do a lot of flips? Because that seems to be what you mean. So perhaps those of us who've been watching wrestling for 30 years or more have learned that while that stuff was cool, you can't sustain a wrestling program on jokes and flips. There's got to be more consistent, better storytelling. And people have got to commit themselves to doing the right thing, the thing that they should, rather than the cool thing, the thing that they could, just because they can. And that's a hard lesson to learn as a wrestling fan, but some of us need to learn it. So it's interesting that Brian who I often disagree with, has been talking a lot of sense lately and saying the things that need to be said because the storytelling, the booking just don't make sense. And it's like no one's paying attention and no one cares as long as every once in a while the crowd pops or cheers or chants. And clearly, that is how you lose your audience because that is what's happening. And I say all this to say that if you were an AEW fan, I am not mad at you. I just want you to understand that some of us have been through this phase where we thought, I grew up in the Attitude Era. Okay. Whenever I was a fan, I thought that people doing flips and jumping off of ladders and through tables and all that stuff that is what professional wrestling should be. But eventually I learned that if you do that long enough, you'll screw yourself over and people will get tired of it because there's no real long-term consistent logical storytelling going on. And eventually even ice cream can start to taste like dish soap if you eat enough of it. And if you care about AEW, maybe you need to think harder about why it's failing, why people are turning away from it, and what Tony Khan and AEW need to do to tell stories, to present wrestling that people will want to watch and that will draw viewers in, help them understand what's happening and who's who, and make them feel something and not kill those feelings or kill that desire to cheer that babyface or boo that heel in the middle of it because they were so desperate to do cool moves and have a banger 5, 6, 7 star match rather than getting the match over. Anyway, with that, I will wrap up this rant. If you are still watching, thank you. For those of you that fell asleep, wake up. Uh, Video's over. Uh, anyway, thank you so much. I will be making another video fairly soon. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm just trying to sort of give some tough love because I do want there to be a competitor out there for WWE, but AEW is not even close to being a competitor right now. And there are some clear, easy, obvious things that can be done to change that. No one seems to be listening. So yeah, thank you. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't, and yeah, leave a comment. Let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next one. I'm Travis, Crucial Wrestling. Have a good one.